The today presentation is a comparative analysis of syntactic construction of nominalization used in applied linguistics research articles by native English writers and Vietnamese counterparts. The presentation created by Dr. Dương Mỹ Thẩm and Nguyễn Ngọc Anh Thi. There are 5 parts in my presentation: introduction, literature review, methodology, research and discussion, conclusion and recommendation. Part 1. The early researchers tended to use discourse methods separately. The recent studies, however, have been conducted by employing copper in combination with qualitative techniques. Maronen and Ventula in University of Warwick. 72 volunteer overseas students were required to attend an academic writing course. The most common problems were given that the difficulties they met in their writing process including metaphorical terms. Hart also indicated that the most difference is found in applied linguistic articles. In the study of metaphor in native and non-native student writing, Claudia identified the use of metaphor in native speakers' writing occupying a higher percentage than non-native speakers. Recently found that nominalization is widely admitted as a valuable feature of scientific writing. In short, nominalization is the single most powerful resource for creating grammatical metaphor, according to the theory of Halliday. Although many investigations were conducted, there were no studies that compared the use of nominalization between Vietnamese and native writers, especially in applied linguistics research articles. This study was carried out to explore the differences and similarities in terms of syntactic construction of nominalization, which is an important part of grammatical metaphor in applied linguistics research articles written by Vietnamese and native English writers. We move to part 2, literature review. The definition of nominalization given by Halliday. His theory of determining nominalization as a source of grammatical metaphor. Through this device, the process and properties are restricted metaphorically as nouns. The following illustrations reveal more about this kind of metaphor. In terms of grammatical theory, nominalization occurs when verbs and adjectives are transformed metaphorically as nouns. In terms of semantic function, nominalization most commonly happens when processes and properties function as things. There are 4 types of nominalization. We have type 1, 2, 3, and 4. The present study focuses on the frequencies of nominalization by employing corpus-based methods. Hence, only type 1, that means adjectival nominalization, and type 2, verbal nominalization, was investigated. The term construction could be defined as a characteristic form or pattern of syntactic categories or features, usually associated with some meaning and or discourse function. There are six positions of syntactic constructions of nominalization in subjunctive position and followed by copular verbs or main verbs. In the head position of noun phrases. In complement position of noun phrases in preverbal positions of the clause. In the verb preverbal positions of passive construction. In predicative positions. And the last one is in that clause post-verbal position. According to the theory of Halliday, there are 13 domains of element metaphor. However, only four types of nominalization are obviously represented in the above table. The scope of the present study focuses on the derivation from verbs to nouns and adjectives to nouns. There are also some previous studies related to my paper. Part 3 Methodology. The corpus employed in this discourse analysis study is the collection of applied linguistic research articles. Research articles represent a valuable resource for joint studies and evidence by their continued use as data for investigating the writing convention, social practices, and values of a discipline and research community. The focus of this research lies on the qualitative and quantitative analysis of instances of nominalization in two corpora of research articles written by Vietnamese and native English writers. So, these methods research, including quantitative and qualitative data, was employed in this study. There were 30 research articles in total. The following is the process of data collection. And the process of data analysis. Part 4 Research and discussion. As discussed above, there are six categories of syntactic construction of nominalizations in my corpus. In category 1, nominalization in head position of noun phrase. In this category, to show full attention of the need for subtractive elements, modified nominalization stands in the head position of noun phrase. The nominalization in this category gives information on the process of conducting on the complement to indicate the result announced after the main verb of the clause. Category 2 Nominalization in preverbal positions of the clause. In preverbal position of the clause, nominalized form in complement position of a noun phrase plays the role of supporting the head of the phrase. As a result, nominalization in this category taking less process very status than the head of the phrase. Category 3. Nominalization in subjunctive position. In this category, a nominalized form was recognized in subjunctive positions and it was followed by linking verbs or main verbs. This group of nominalization was mainly used to indicate simple relationships with the predicative elements of the clauses. Category number 4. Nominalization in that clause post-verbal position. Nominalizations in that clause post-verbal position functions play the roles of the accusative element of the preceding verb and the adjective element of the verb that follows it. There are several verbs like illustrate, conclude, imply, demonstrate, etc. are the main verbs in the independent clauses. Category number 5. Nominalization in predicative position. Nominalization in predicative position was also the most common in both couple. This type of nominalized forms functions as a secutive element that the authors choose to demonstrate a type of treatment done to achieve some effect by the use of nominalization. Category number 6. Nominalization in preverbal positions of passive construction. In this last category, nominalized forms stand in preverbal position of passive construction. Nominalization in the subjunctive non-agentive position serves to manipulate the text recipient attitudes on the significance of the process carried out. Now we move to 2.4 discussion. According to Halliday, additional grammatical metaphor as the material, which includes process types and nominalization. The exploration of the functions of nominalization in vocabulary was conducted to clarify the differences between metaphorical expression and non-metaphorical expression. The first 1,000 nominal phrases of true copper were determined and then classified into 6 categories. In order to examine how nominalizations yield in collective research articles create metaphorical meaning. Associated with the theory of a reservoir, it is obvious to notice that only nominalization in head position of the phrase, in subjunctive position, and in preverbal position of passive construction strongly satisfy the intention of nominal phrase. That means which is to construct grammatical metaphor. This study aimed at considering syntactic construction of nominal phrases in both coupled. Both Vietnamese and native English writers tend to raise the higher lexical density of a text under the help of information density function. This research may be explained by the fact that grammatical metaphor is one of the elements that support the higher degree of lexical density in written English, which given by Halliday. The second most used function in native English research articles were relining function. Native English writers tend to ignore the role of participants so as to create a higher concentration of experimental meaning rather than personal pronouns. Under the help of the third most purpose, tester function, a large amount of information could be replaced by an abstract phenomenon. Interestingly, there was a special function that only existed in native English research article, which relied as a presupposition function. Native English writers gave their opinion about a previous issue by using nominalization. Contrastingly, Vietnamese writers applied tensor function as the second most used function in their writings. They subvert previous ideas by giving new packed information. This finding also supports a study of Hariri and Kazemian that nominalization enhances the tone of the text more than abstract, technical, and formal. At the earliest discussion, non-native writers tended to use lexical meaning in their writing rather than metaphorical terms. It could be concluded that both Vietnamese and native English authors seem to share the quantitative similarity in the use of nominalization. However, in terms of additional function, there are some differences. This might be due to the fact Vietnamese writers are not as influent and efficient in English as the native English writers. And the Vietnamese authors tend to employ lexical meaning rather than metaphorical expression in their research article. On the other hand, the native English writers use nominalization terms in their writing effectively. And we go to part 5, conclusion and recommendation. Conclusion: there are significant differences in syntactic construction between two groups of writers is one of the most considerable findings of this study. Native English writers have tended to employ nominalization in the help position of nouns, in subjunctive position, in the preverbal position of passive construction. These kinds of nominal phrases strongly establish grammatical metaphor in academic writing. Vietnamese writers have had a trend of using nominalization in complement position of a noun phrase in that clause postverbal position and in predicative position. The lexical meanings of the words not to establish grammatical metaphor. That means Vietnamese writers tend to use default nominalization. There are some implications of the study. First, both teachers and learners should pay more attention to employ not only textual but also additional and interpersonal. Second, it might have a remarkable contribution to Vietnamese writers' awareness of the importance of nominalization in academic writing. As a result of using nominalization, writers may prevent unnecessary repetitions of the same word and ignore the role of participants from the intentional act, which means their writings become more abstract and formal. There are also some limitations of the study. At first, The cover includes 30 research articles written by Vietnamese and 30 research articles written by native English writers in the applied linguistic domain. With the small size of the covers, the findings may not generalize the whole context of the research objectives. Secondly, the study has just addressed the use of state nominalization, not the other kind of nominalization. Thirdly, the present study only focuses on the syntactic construction of the first 1,000 identified nominalization. The function of nominalization in the order position, such as preverbal position of the clause, last clause, postverbal position, and predicative position, are not mentioned. Lastly, due to the limitation of the time, the statistical analysis to determine whether differences in native English research article and Vietnamese research article performance reaches the point of statistical significance was not conducted. There are, there are some recommendations for further research. Based on the limitations of the study, further researchers need to employ the cover side and explore the use of nominalization as well as the metaphorical term in other disciplines such as computer science, biology, mechanical engineering, and so on. It is hoped that other types of English nominalization such as agentive nominalization, instrumental nominalization, manner nominalization, and so on should be examined based on the systemic function approach. Nominalization in preverbal positions of the clause. That clause, postverbal position, and predicative position need to be under in-depth investigation. Further studies may address other functions of nominalization used in research articles. There are some references of the present study. Thank you for your listening.